Welcome to the webinar. My name is Joseph Rodrigues, and today we're going to talk about time tracking for productivity. So this is a webinar that I've been meaning to do for a while because it's an area that I've been playing around with for the last 5 or 6 months now. And prior to that, I got to the point where I'm sure a lot of you have gotten to, where you wake up in the morning, you do all your things as efficiently as you think you're doing it, and at the end of the day you feel like you've run out of time. But not only that, you feel like you haven't accomplished much. I mean, it feels like you're busy, but it doesn't actually feel like you're getting a lot of stuff done. Intuitively, you kind of feel it, that you could actually do way more within a day. Well, when I started experiencing that and going through that, I went around looking for solutions, trying to find different things that could help me with that. And I came across a little bit of information, which I'm going to share with you today, and implemented it. So essentially I started tracking my time. And it's amazing what I discovered. And what's also amazing is the kind of results that I got out of it, and the perspective that I got out of it, the progress that I've made over the last 5 or 6 months from implementing time tracking. So I'm going to share all that with you today on the webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. Why should you track your time? Well, one of the primary reasons why you should track your time is you need to know where your time is going. It's not enough to just kind of guess and hope that you're using your time effectively. You really need to know where it's going, and the only way to do it is to track your time. We'll talk more about that in a moment. The second reason why you should track your time, and by the way, there's many reasons why you should track your time. In this webinar, we're going to be focusing on these 3 reasons here. Reason number 2 is, how much is your time worth? So you could be billing out, if you're a consultant, at $100 an hour. And let's say you get a 5-hour deal, that's $500. Well, what about the time that it takes you to travel to the location? What about the time it takes you to prep? If you keep all that in consideration and you make an adjustment, how much is your time really worth? Also, if you work in an organization that pays you by salary, and let's say you're putting the traditional 40 hours of work in, actual work, which they expect you to do, but really on the weekends you're working, and on the nighttime you're working, and again you have to travel to your location. What is your time actually worth? You know, I've done this little experiment to myself, which we're going to talk about, and I hope you're going to do also, where you actually track to see, based on how much you make, your salary wise, and the amount of time you put into doing your work, everything from meetings to the actual work to travel, and then figuring out exactly what it is, the calculation, doing a little calculation, and then finding out what your adjusted hourly rate is. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Another reason why you should track your time is you need to track your progress. Well, I think it's fair to assume that if you're even watching this webinar right now, you're pretty goal-oriented, very driven to get the most out of your day, and you've set goals, and you want to meet those goals, and probably those goals are pretty aggressive. And as a result of setting these aggressive goals, you know that it takes a lot of work to get there, and more importantly, a lot of time. If you track your time, you're able to track your progress. You'll be able to know how long it'll take you before you actually hit your goal. Now, there's more variables than that, but this will give you a clear understanding, and this is what it's about, gaining a clear understanding. Let's talk about where your time is going. Now, the first point that I have up here is, if we know, it's usually a guess. So when I first got started in trying to figure out where my time goes, I would just kind of guess. And at the end of the day, I would evaluate and say, I spent 1 hour in meetings today, a couple hours traveling, 4 hours in actually working on a specific project, and 2 hours doing something else. And I would just kind of ballpark it and log my time at the end of the day. Now, by ballparking it and just kind of guesstimating it without actually tracking my time, I found that I was way off. And this usually is the case for a lot of people. You see, you might be familiar with that whole analogy that if you buy a Starbucks latte every single day, if it costs you like $5 every single day, it adds up over the course of a month, and if you invest that money, you will pretty much secure your retirement fund. The same goes with time. Losing 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there, it adds up, especially when, like I said, you as an individual being on this webinar, you really want to get the most out of your time. And let's put it this way, if you can squeeze an extra 2-3 hours of productive time a day just from tracking your time, then it's totally worth it. And most likely, if you think you know where your time is going without actually tracking your time, then you're usually guessing. And if you're like me, then your guesses are probably about 70% correct. So there's a 30% margin of error, and that 30% margin of error results in about 3, 4, or even 5 hours of lost time. The second point is that tasks take longer than we think. So again, my example earlier of if you are a consultant and you are getting paid 5 hours to do some specific work, well, there's other variables that you don't keep in consideration when you're billing the client, such as the travel time, or even if you do keep the travel time in consideration, I'm talking about the actual travel time. Sometimes you can travel to a client and you can estimate it to take 1 hour, but there could be traffic, there could be certain variables beyond your control, and it could actually take you 1.5 hours and 2 hours. And that's just on travel. Then there's the post-support work. So if you're a IT consultant, one of the big aspects of your job is being able to support the clients after you do the work. And usually most consultants don't factor in that time. And as a result, they're spending hours on specific tasks related to the project which they quoted and billed for. And as a result, the actual task, the full task that you thought you were going to do in, let's say, 5 hours is taking you in like 7 or 8 or 10 hours. So it's important to understand that tasks usually take longer than we think, and all the more reason to track our time. The third point is being busy versus getting stuff done. So this is a common one based on my own personal experience. I thought I was getting a lot of work done. I mean, it felt like I was busy from morning till night, but when I looked at my task list, when I looked at my objectives, stuff wasn't moving on there, or stuff wasn't moving as fast as I would have liked it to move. Things weren't getting done as fast. So there's a difference between being busy and getting stuff done. You can take two individuals. One person would be really efficient and they're getting stuff done, and they maybe only work like 5 hours a day. And then you have another individual who works 12 hours a day, but they don't even get half the stuff done as the first individual. So that's the difference between being busy and getting stuff done. Another reason why you want to track your time is you really want to know how much your time is worth. So we talked about the example of a consultant, and what you really want to figure out is the adjusted hourly rate, as point 1 states. So if you're billing out at $100 an hour, and I know I'm using the example of a consultant here, but I mean, you could really put a figure on any type of work you're doing, and we'll talk more about how I do that in a moment. But it just seems to be a very general example and a very easy to explain example. So that's why I'm focusing on that. But this is applicable to anyone that's watching this webinar right now. So adjusted hourly rate. If you're billing out at $100 an hour and you're putting in 10 hours to get that work done, I know I'm exaggerating a little bit on that, and then your worth or your actual adjusted hourly rate is $10 an hour. And you need to figure that out so that you know where your time is going and how much your time is actually worth. So the second point, billing at $50 an hour but making $10 an hour. Now this is pretty common. If you bill out at $50 an hour for 2 hours and it takes you 20 hours to do the work, which I know it sounds like an exaggeration, but if you keep in consideration all the time it actually takes you to do the work, including travel and everything, you could be making an adjusted hourly rate of $10 an hour versus $50 an hour. So we need to use time tracking to figure out if we are doing this and how can we get away from it. Point number 3, doing work that is not worth your time. So this is kind of important. The only way you'll really be able to know what work is not worth your time is if you know your adjusted hourly rate and you look for trends. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but let's look at it this way. Let's say you were making $50 an hour and you were very efficient with your time, you tracked all your time, and you were actually making, at your adjusted hourly rate, $50 an hour. Then a pile of work came on, say it was in some administrative work, and it was going to take you about 20 hours to complete that work. Well, that 20 hours is not actually making you any money. I mean, you're not billing out your clients for that, but you need to do that work because it's part of your business. Well, if your time is worth $50 an hour and you figured that out after figuring out your adjusted hourly rate, then wouldn't it make sense to hire somebody to do that work for, let's say, $20 or even $30 or even $40 an hour? That would free up that time. You would free up 20 hours, which you can then take and work on client projects. And while you're working on those client projects and making $50 an hour, you have somebody else that you're paying to do the other work for you. So this seems pretty obvious, and it's one of those things where it just seems so simple to even talk about this, but you'll be surprised, and just look around and just kind of look at it in our own examples, how much time we spend doing the things that's not worth doing. So I don't want you to get me wrong on this. This is not about looking at everything from the perspective of dollar value, because there is a bunch of things that you might want to still do, and even though you're not getting paid your rate of $50 an hour to do it, you enjoy it, such as cooking or walking the dog. You know, there's dog walkers that walk the dog for a certain rate, and probably from a financial perspective, you're better off paying a dog walker, but walking a dog is an enjoyable experience. And if you enjoy doing things, then you shouldn't put a dollar value on it. That's not what this is about. But what this is about is knowing where your time goes, and when it comes to making decisions of what to do with your time, you need to have some metrics established. So now that we talked about some of the reasons why you would want to track your time, let's talk about my actual 3-step process for tracking your time. So what I've done is I've broken this down into 3 steps. If you follow these 3 steps, you'll be able to get the most out of tracking your time, and you'll be able to tap into higher levels of productivity and better time management. Step number 1, log your time using your software. Step number 2, evaluate your data. And step number 3, make your changes. Let's go deeper into them. Step number 1, log your time using software. So there is some software that you're going to be using to log your time. Now you could do it the old-fashioned way and write it down with paper and pens, but it's recommended that you use some computer software. If you've got a smartphone, then you can get Hours Tracker for the iPhone. It's 1 word. And if you have an Android, you could use Time Tracker, which is 2 words. Let's actually go to the sites and take a look at them. So this is Hours Tracker, and this is the app that I use. I really like using this one because it allows me to not only clock in and out of tasks, but I can add multiple tasks in there. I can clock into multiple tasks at a time. So this is very important depending on how granular you want to get in your time tracking. Do you want to track it by project, or do you want to track it by specific aspects of a project? This will allow you to do that and also add the dollar value to your time that you're tracking. This is a really good app, and this is the one that I have been using for the last 5 or 6 months. If you have an Android device, you could use this one. It's called Time Tracker, and it essentially does the same thing as Hours Tracker. If you don't have an Android device or an iPhone, any other time tracking software would do. But it does help to have it on mobile devices because it allows you to easily clock in and out of tasks. Another piece of software that you'll need is an Excel spreadsheet or any other type of spreadsheet software. Again, you can do this with pen and paper, but to be more organized and more efficient, you want to use a spreadsheet. I'm going to show you how we do that in a moment. Step number 2, evaluate your data. So what we want to do is log our time using Hours Tracker or Time Tracker or any other time tracking software. Take that information and import it into a spreadsheet. Now I've created an example to show you. Now your time tracking software should allow you to import your data in the form of CSV or some other type of format into a spreadsheet. If not, you could just manually type it in here. And this spreadsheet that I've created right here is a very basic spreadsheet. It's nothing like the one that I am using right now. The one that I'm using right now I've built and grown, and it's gotten a lot more complex than this one. But I essentially started with something like this. This one's fundamentally, again, for consultants, and this one tracks your adjusted hourly rate, so you can see what your time is actually worth and make decisions accordingly based on this information. But you can create a spreadsheet based on your own specific needs, and yours might not have dollar values on them. So let me explain how this spreadsheet works. On the first column here we have hours billed. So a consultant, let's say, works for the rate of $50 an hour, which is in column 2 here, might bill out 2 hours at $50 an hour, and in column C will show an earnings of $100, which is just 50 times 2. Now, let's say the consultant spent 6 hours on this project. Well, what's their adjusted hourly rate? It's $16.67. Let's say the consultant spent 8 hours on it. Well, they're down to $12.50 right now. They wouldn't be able to really know what the accurate number is until they get the data from their time tracking application and import it in here. I know it sounds like, again, I'm giving an exaggerated example here, where somebody builds out 2 hours at $50 an hour, makes $100 an hour, but they actually spent 8 hours. But keep into consideration the travel time, the amount of prep time, the time spent in meetings, the time spent negotiating the deal. Like, I know this is a small deal here, but that time adds up. And if you can log all that time and track everything, you can see exactly how much you make in that deal as far as your adjusted hourly rate goes. And then you can make evaluations and decisions based on that information. So feel free to start with something like this, but you're going to want to customize this and build it accordingly to fit your needs. That's the kind of information we want to capture from our time tracking software and import into our spreadsheet. The next thing you want to do is make comparisons. So what I like to do is look at my spreadsheet that I have every single week at the end of the week and make comparisons to the week prior. That way I can see if I'm making progress, or am I falling behind, or do I need to make adjustments as to what work I should be and should not be doing. Sometimes you'll find specific things that you're doing that you're not fully aware of, but they're the best things that you could possibly be doing, and in the terms of being a consultant or running your own business or working, they could be the most profitable things, and we don't put much emphasis on it because we don't have the actual data. And tracking your time allows you to capture that data and place it into a centralized location like a spreadsheet and make comparisons. The third thing you want to do is look for insights. So an insight is something that will show you clearly, based on the data, where you should not be spending your time or where you should be spending your time. And again, you can make decisions on that accordingly. Step number 3, make your changes. It's one thing to track your time, grab all that information, put it in a fancy spreadsheet and look at it all day, but it's a whole other thing to do something about it and make the changes. This is a very important step. So some of the things that you could do, and I'm just going to share with you 3 things just to keep this webinar brief, is number 1, cut out the time wasters. So there'll be a bunch of tasks that you're doing that aren't providing any value at all or providing very little value, and it's just taking up your time. So you're going to want to cut those things out. Another thing you want to do is learn to say no. sometimes when we're really motivated and we want to achieve high levels of success, we say yes to a lot of things when realistically we're not able to commit to it, or those things might not provide that high of value for us. And we just got to learn to say no to the things that we shouldn't do and yes to the things that we should do, again based on the data that you've captured and the insights that you found. The third point, most important, do more of the things that matter. Now, in this webinar, I gave a lot of examples based on dollar value. The reality is that in life, it's not just the things that make us money or that are profitable that matter the most. Things like spending time with your family, taking the dog for a walk, spending time with your kids, friends, and loved ones, those are the things that can matter the most. And those are the most rewarding things in life and are probably the things we want to do more of. Now, if you have something like time tracking in place and you see where all your time is going, you can make decisions to cut out some of the things you don't need, say no to the things you don't have to do, and do more of the things that matter. So that being said, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this webinar. If you have any questions about time tracking, you can email me at joe@irisreading.com. I hope that you will take everything that you've learned today and implement it. As I mentioned to you, this is not only something that I recommend that you do, but this is something that I do every single day. And I can't even begin to tell you the level of productivity that I have now as a result of implementing time tracking. And I really hope that you go out there and try it for yourself. So again, if you have any questions, you can email me at joe@irisreading.com. Thank you for watching.